As their common name very much suggests, the neon blue crayfish sport the most amazing blue colour. Now, when they're young, they tend to be a very light, almost powder blue colour, and as they grow, as they mature, that tends to develop into a much darker, deeper blue. And then they'll also show other colours. Mine shows greens and reds and orange hues on its claws and down its body. They really are a kaleidoscope of colour, fascinating creatures. They grow to around 5 or 6 inches long, which is about 12 to 15 centimetres. And they're essentially an oversized shrimp. They're just like a jumbo-sized version of the Neocaridina shrimp we keep in our aquariums, although they've got the powerful pincers up the front, which the Neocaridina shrimp don't possess. Much like our shrimp, they possess a relatively powerful tail, which they use to propel themselves through the water, and underneath their body, they have swimmerettes, which they do use to swim through the water, although in my experience, they tend to spend more time walking along the substrate than they do swimming around in the aquarium. I certainly don't find mine spend as much time up in the water column as my shrimp do. Again, much like our Neocaridina shrimp, the neon blue crayfish have long antennae, which they actively use to seek out food. When you put food into the aquarium, you will notice the antennae go crazy. They use them like feelers to find where the food might be, and once they locate it, they're on it just like that. Now, these guys are incredibly hardy. They make an ideal pet for those new to the hobby because they will stand the mistakes that new fish and shrimp keepers often make. Whilst we should always strive for perfect conditions to keep our livestock in, these guys can tolerate living in less than perfect conditions. They're incredibly hardy. General consensus is that these guys will live for 5 to 6 years in captivity, but I have spoken to 1 or 2 keepers that swear they've had theirs for considerably longer. I haven't had mine that long. Mine seems to be doing well, but at this stage, I have to go with common wisdom that it will live for about 5 or 6 years, give or take. Now, when it comes to housing neon blue crayfish, you can keep them in something as small as a 10-gallon, but they do get relatively large and they are fairly active. So I would recommend a 29 or a 30-gallon as a minimum. I personally keep mine in a 47-gallon tank, which is about 180 litres. As mentioned, they do spend more time walking around the substrate than they do up in the column, and therefore really footprint is much more important than overall water volume. You wouldn't want to keep these guys in a cylinder tank or something that was really tall but didn't have a large footprint. When you keep a neon blue crayfish, you will find they spend a lot of time walking around and exploring their environment. They need that space. If you keep them in something with too small a footprint, they'll have nowhere to go. They'll have nothing to explore. They really are surprisingly active. When it comes to water parameters, these guys are not too fussy. As I say, they're incredibly hardy. When it comes to temperature, they want to be kept somewhere between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, which is roughly 18 to 24 degrees Celsius. I have no doubt they can happily survive slightly either side of those two temperatures. As for pH, they want the pH of somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5, and again, I have no doubt they can tolerate slightly to either side of that. But they do, much like our shrimp, they do need minerals in the water. So we really want to keep them in some relatively hard water or something with dissolved minerals, dissolved calcium in the water. If you have especially soft water, then you might want to consider adding something like crushed coral, which will add minerals to the water and help when it comes to the neon blue crayfish molting. Now, these guys eat a lot and poop a lot, and they do need some relatively decent filtration. A sponge filter or hang-on back filter will be absolutely fine, but whatever you give them, they do seem to like good flow in the tank. They do seem to be happier when there is lots of water movement. I've noticed a difference. I moved mine from an aquarium which had a sponge filter to one which had an internal power filter, which really does circulate the water. And there's no doubt her activity levels have really increased since I moved it into the bigger tank with the more active, the more powerful filtration, in the tank with the greater flow. So based on my experience at least, whilst these guys do need decent filtration, they really seem to like the water circulation, the flow in the tank. Now, if you enjoy keeping fish and shrimp and crabs and crayfish and axolotls and pretty much anything that lives in a tank of water, why not subscribe to the channel? Each week I'm releasing a new video on the subject of fish keeping, shrimp keeping, crayfish, axolotls, snails, crabs, whatever it might be. subscribe to the channel, and you won't miss the next video. So what about decorating the tank? Well, these guys don't really care too much when it comes to substrate. They don't really care too much when it comes to decoration. But there's a couple of things you need to bear in mind. One, they do like somewhere to hide. Now, personally, I use a short length of PVC pipe, which is between some rocks, which creates an artificial cave. Now, maybe you can take some rocks and build a cave. Maybe you can add some large pieces of wood so the crayfish has got somewhere to tuck itself, somewhere to call itself home. They do like to get away. If I suddenly appear at my tank unexpectedly, the crayfish darts away back to its cave. They need somewhere to retreat to, so do bear that in mind. What I wouldn't do is go to too much trouble aquascaping the tank. Because firstly, much like if you keep Oscars, these guys will rearrange the tank as they see fit. If you fill it up with little stones and pieces of timber all placed strategically throughout, it won't be long before they simply move it around. They dig under it, they shift it, they nudge it, they bash into it, and they will quickly rearrange it. I would suggest when you're setting up a tank for your neon blue crayfish, you start off with the rocks directly on the bottom of the tank, then the substrate around it so they can't dig and shift and move them. If you just place small rocks on top of the substrate, they will dig underneath them. The second thing I wouldn't worry too much about is plants. I haven't noticed mine eating the plants, but she sure does dig them up, snip through them, bash them out the way, lay on them, crush them. Anything she can to destroy the plants, she happily does. So I now keep mine in a tank with no plants at all because, with the possible exception of Java moss or some floating plants, I think they quickly just destroy them. It's that simple, really. I haven't noticed them eat them, but destroy them, definitely. When it comes to setting up your tank, you want a substrate, you want some rocks, you want some sort of a cave, but I wouldn't waste my time arranging it in a special way or going to too much trouble with the plants, because they will destroy them. When it comes to the temperament of the neon blue crayfish, I would class them as fairly aggressive. Now sure, they're not the most aggressive creature you'll ever come across. They're not going to climb out the tank and chase you down the street, but anything you put in there, it is going to have a go at. When I first got mine, I was recommended that I keep them with something fast swimming, like a guppy or a neon tetra, and I'd had mine about 2 weeks before I realized it had shredded the tails of every single guppy in that tank. Now, the guppies spent most of their time up the top and they were relatively quick swimmers, and there's no other way to describe them, their tails were shredded. As such, I now keep mine alone. I wouldn't recommend keeping any tank mates at all with a neon blue crayfish. I have seen footage online of other people doing it. I maybe would try it again with something like hatchetfish that just stay at the surface. But certainly my female, she will act aggressively towards anything else I put in the tank. The other thing to bear in mind is these guys are escape artists. If you keep yours in an aquarium without a lid, it won't be very long at all before it realizes and it's climbed out and it's across your lounge floor, getting your car keys in your car and driving off down the street. I've got a heavy glass lid on mine. I've also blocked up all the gaps at the back where the airline and the power cords come in, because I have heard other hobbyists say that these guys will get on the airline, climb up through if they can fit through the gap, they'll climb through it, they'll be gone, and of course, unfortunately, they usually perish once they're out the tank for too long. So I would class these guys as moderately aggressive, but certainly excellent escape artists, so bear that in mind. When it comes to feeding the neon blue crayfish, they are essentially detrivores, much like the shrimp we keep in our aquariums, and they will as such eat pretty much anything you put in. I feed mine algae wafers, sinking pellets, frozen bloodworm, frozen brine shrimp, frozen daphnia. I've given it small earthworms. It will also eat peas and small pieces of vegetable that will sink. It'll essentially eat anything that it comes across. Now, so far, I haven't bred mine, but I can tell you when it comes to sexing the neon blue crayfish, you essentially need to turn them over, and the males possess what is essentially an extra pair of legs that it uses to grab hold of the female during spawning. If you turn it over and it has the additional pair of legs, it's a male. If it doesn't, it's a female. At this stage, I haven't successfully bred them, so I can't speak too much on that, but the reports I've read are that they're not too difficult to breed in captivity. So in summary, the neon blue crayfish have great personalities, they're incredibly hardy, and if you've got a 30 or 40 gallon aquarium sitting around that you want to do something different with, why not get yourself 1 or 2 of these little guys and maybe consider selling the babies to other hobbyists in your local area or back to your local fish store. Now, I normally like to end these videos recommending to you which video to watch next, but on this occasion, I can't think of one, so I'll ask YouTube to put one right here. Thanks for watching.